Welcome, folks. It is post-Super Bowl. The era of 2022 has shifted to the draft. We're going to get into free agency as well because we can't forget about that. Matt Derrick is with us. We're going to get into where they go starting this week one after the Super Bowl. Welcome to Locked On Chiefs.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome, Chiefs fans. This is Locked On Chiefs, part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. And we are certainly here this day. We're going to keep doing that. Thanks for making us your first listen. And check out the Locked On NFL Draft Show if you would. That's the other show you can make your second listen. We're free on all those platforms, including YouTube, which, because Matt's here, would you like and sub? And then we can attribute it to Matt. That'll be the best way to do it. I'm your host, Ryan Tracy. You can find me at Ryan Tracy NFL on Twitter. And I'm the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting. And that's what we do, as well as RGR Football and the Draft Show. Matt Derrick of Chiefs Digest, editor-at-large, editor-in-charge is what I'm going to go with today. How are you doing?
I am doing pretty well, Ryan. I'm just here hoping that some of your draft knowledge will rub off on me.
Well, first I have to acquire it, so that's what I'm working on these days. Film room at night is basically my life at this point. So the wife has said goodbye for a time being, and that's the way it'll go. We're going to get into targets, etc. But I wanted to start nice and easy. Chiefs could have been in the Super Bowl. They could have won the Super Bowl, in my opinion. But after watching that ball game, what are your takeaways from where they are and where they need to go in terms of like priorities for this offseason?
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think watching this game, the Chiefs could have absolutely hung with both those teams. I mean, and obviously they did with the Bengals. They had two close losses during the season, but this was a team that, you know, I think under certain circumstances the Chiefs could have and should have beaten. And I don't think that the Rams were demonstrably better either. But watching the Super Bowl, came away with another, you know, I think it's now 3 reminders that we've got watching the Titans against the Bengals, the Chiefs against the Bengals, and the Rams against the Bengals. You got to get pressure on the quarterback. And it's not just enough to be in the neighborhood. You got to hit the quarterback. You got to bring him down sometimes. That's the difference, and that's why the Chiefs weren't in the Super Bowl. I mean, if they had sacked Joe Burrow, they would have been there. And if they'd gotten to the Super Bowl, they would have needed to sack Matt Stafford. And if they'd done that, they would have won a Super Bowl. So to me, I think this offseason, I don't know how your Brett Veach can't watch this postseason that the Chiefs were involved in and watching the Super Bowl and not walk away seeing we got to get a whole lot better getting after the quarterback.
I completely agree. And I think that the staff will agree as well. I know there's a little bit of change there with Ryan Poles moving on. So we should get some kind of inkling eventually before the draft about who's risen to take that role. I think it offers a change of pace a little bit, hopefully a little bit more influence. And hopefully what I'm looking at is seeing that the offensive line rebuild that they did was important, but that Cincinnati was able to get to that Super Bowl without an offensive line for a stark contrast of what they don't have. In rebuilding the defensive line, that's not only the priority, but it's got to be, I think, at all levels, including free agency. Do you see that as goal number 1 for the staff, and do you think that they can sustain that throughout the offseason?
Yeah, I do. I mean, and to me, you know, the Chiefs had to rebuild the offensive line last year. I mean, for no other reason than that was your weakness in the Super Bowl. But more than that, you've got a $450 million quarterback. You got to protect that investment. So that was the whole purpose of the offseason last year, was Brett Veach saying, not going to have another day with his quarterback running around and running for his life the way he did against the Buccaneers last year in the Super Bowl. And that mission was accomplished. And I think you're getting ready to see the exact same mentality on the other side of the ball this offseason. I think they're going to be looking at every single way that they can improve that defensive line. And it's got to be with every resource at their disposal. It's not just the draft. The draft has to be a part of that. Free agency will be a part of that. Probably looking around for trade opportunities is going to be a part of that. And that's exactly what they did last offseason with the offensive line. So to me, I see the exact same mentality and the exact same strategy that they used on the offensive line last year going towards the defensive side this year, and specifically that pass rush and that front four.
Now, that rebuild on the offensive line took a while, more so than I expected it to. I'd hoped for them to kind of lead out with some of those changes. Obviously, Joe Thuney in free agency was the big diamond to fall. But we know there was a chase for Trent Williams before the Orlando Brown trade came around. Do you expect this to drag out throughout the entirety up until the draft as well?
And maybe beyond. I still think that Melvin Ingram could definitely be a part of this, defensive front next season. And he's certainly, I think, fit in well, and it's worth having him back. But I can also see Melvin Ingram not making his decision until May. I mean, it's going to depend on just what other offers are out there and what opportunities are there. But he could be another late decision. And it could be the same at some other spots on that defensive line. I mean, I think the Chiefs want to get the bulk of that work done, by the draft, because at that point, going into the draft, you need to know what you're doing with your early picks. And if Chiefs are in a spot where they still don't have the impact edge rusher, pass rusher that they want, and now you're sitting at 30, it's hard to get what you want at 30, especially when it comes to edge rushers, because there's a line. And there can be a run. I mean, 30 might, and some drafts might get you the 7th best pass rusher. And that's not what, the Chiefs would want to hear going into a draft. So you've got, and it was the same thing last year. I mean, because, if the Chiefs had gone into the draft without getting Orlando Brown, well, now their entire draft becomes about getting an offensive lineman. And getting that done changed everything else. I mean, because making the deal for Orlando Brown enables you then to get Nick Bolton. It enables you to get Creed Humphrey. It enables you to get Trey Smith. And it allowed that draft to unfold in a completely different way than it would have if they had been obsessed with finding a starting left tackle in the draft. This year's the same way. I mean, if they can't make some inroads towards that edge rusher position in free agency, so that by the time that they get to the draft isn't all about that. Mm-hmm. That's where you get in trouble. That's where you make bad draft picks. That's where you make bad draft day trades. Nothing good happens if you go into a draft and you absolutely have to walk out with a player at a specific position.
I have a theory about that. I think we're going to save that for next week, though, because we have to talk about some of the changes that are coming within the building and how that affects what they're going to do going forward. We're going to tackle that next. Football season might be over, but basketball is picking up steam, and all the pro and college hoops are going right now. March Madness is on the way as well. Lots of odds, totals, player performances, props, anything you can think of where you want to know what is the odds to lay. BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all of your sports betting action. It doesn't necessarily have to be basketball either. It can be any kind of sports, hockey, boxing, UFC, pro soccer, anything out there that you want to put some action on, you can do it. BetOnline remains the best place for all of your sports scores and podcasts and news this season, next season, and every season. Head over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action and get the news that you need to be smart about laying your odds at BetOnline, where the game starts. So, Matt, I'm waiting. I'm guessing you're waiting. I think most of the known world is waiting to find out what this mysterious meeting has happened with Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy. It's been a long, strange road. Has this overall, just taking a step back about the way the staff has changed, the cap hiring, all that, roll it in together, how diametrically opposed is this from what you expected to happen?
Not completely opposite. I mean, certainly you normally think that by mid-February, and certainly after the Super Bowl, that things are pretty well settled. Because usually by that point, most of the chairs are filled around the league, and there's not a whole lot of questions going on. This year, there's still some questions. I mean, there's still some offensive coordinator positions that still need to be filled. So there's teams that could certainly still be looking to pick up what Eric Bieniemy right now is essentially a free agent. And those kind of things with it, and that's the tough thing with the EB situation, is that making a move from offensive coordinator to offensive coordinator in this league, that can't happen until after the Super Bowl. Upward moves, you can get promotions, but you can't leave from team to team before your contract is out. That gets a little bit trickier and difficult. I mean, yeah, things can get worked out, but that normally doesn't happen. So, if EB wanted to consider anything outside the Chiefs that was anything other than a head coach, that path hasn't really been open to him until the last couple of days. So now that's there. He can talk to some other teams. And normally we'd be at a spot right now where we would say that the coaching carousel is done. But Sean McVay in Los Angeles hanging out there that maybe he's going to retire suddenly throws everything in the air. Because if Sean McVay actually did get up and retire, chances are Minnesota Vikings now need a head coach, because Kevin O'Connell is staying in Los Angeles to be a head coach there probably.
Yeah.
And Eric Bieniemy would certainly be back in the picture in Minnesota. So, things aren't closed there. But, I think we talked about it a little bit last week. I still think that this absolutely holds true, which is that what Eric Bieniemy is going to do is almost entirely in Eric Bieniemy's hands. Because if he wants to be an NFL head coach, I think the NFL has told him at this point with its actions that that's not going to happen as offensive coordinator in Kansas City. So if he wants to be an NFL head coach, he's got to go somewhere else. And if that means being an OC and an assistant head coach somewhere else, he needs to consider that. If he just wants to be a head coach and wants to go coach and want to go coach in college, take a year off and wait and see what happens next college season. Probably the right decision. Because you're not going to go from NFL offensive coordinator to college head coach is a difficult transition to make, especially when you're a playoff team that you know that you're going to be tied up until mid-February. That's not what colleges want. So to me, it's all about EB deciding what he wants. If he wants to be a head coach at one level or another, I don't think he's going to do it from Kansas City, and that's why he's got a decision to make.
Well, I think it's very interesting you bring up. I don't understand how a 27-year-old head coach could retire, but that seems to be what Sean McVay is talking about. All kidding aside, folks, he's super young. I don't buy that for a second, but it's an interesting domino to use in a number of different ways that they will. But if it were to not work out with the Los Angeles Rams, I cannot see that happening. But do you think that it is that quick that Bieniemy could be back in the mix in Minnesota as everything else starts to kind of fade away? That's a one-trick pony. It's the only job left, right?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm EB, I'm not putting a lot of eggs in that basket because you're right. It's Sean McVay making a very, very perplexing decision. That, I mean, honestly, probably makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, there's probably more guys in the NFL with young kids that probably should be walking away if they've made some money and they've won a ring and everything. It's hard to do, though. But then again, I mean, if somebody's going to pay you a lot of money to talk about it on TV, it's a lot easier than coaching. So, but you're right. I mean, the likelihood is low. So if I'm EB, I'm not putting my eggs in that basket. Which brings us back again. What is the best thing? Is it if he wants to be a head coach? To me, his two best paths to being a head coach are either going somewhere else and proving he can do it somewhere else as an OC, or it's taking a year off. And you know what? With the report that was leaked out over the weekend, saying that that's a possibility because it's been a long couple of seasons and maybe he just needs some time to power down and think about his options and even, hey, Steve, steal the Steve Spagnuolo playbook. I mean, just kind of go on a sabbatical and rethink things. And because I tell you what, after that year away, I think Steve Spagnuolo came back as a better coach after his year away from the NFL.
Well, it allows you to do all the things that you haven't been able to do because of the cycle and because of your playoff run in compiling your lists of evaluations of existing rosters of the guys that you'd bring in on your staff and not be trying to throw that together as you're juggling where everybody else is going as well. I think it makes you look a little bit more prepared as well. And I think that could be a boon. But on the flip side for the Chiefs, you've lost your offensive coordinator. You've lost your quarterback coach. And if this scenario is that EB is not going to be back, what do you do? What do you expect the team to do? And do you think that that this is still something up in the air that they're searching for answers here?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you have a couple of different options. I mean, one is that you go with what you know. And Andy Reid certainly has a lot of tentacles out into different parts of the NFL. So filling both of those positions with people that he's familiar with, either people that he's worked with before as an offensive coordinator, would not be hard at all. I mean, there's candidates out there. I don't know, for instance, I mean, Matt Nagy would be a natural connection. But then again, I mean, Matt Nagy, whether his contract would allow him to double dip, I mean, he might also be in the position to sit back and count that Bears money for a year before he gets back. But there's other coaches out there. I mean, there's plenty of guys with Andy Reid connections for both those spots. So I don't think they would be difficult to fill. The question to me is, whether Reid would look outside the organization and outside his comfort zone to fill one or both of those roles. Because I do think that would be a great opportunity because Andy's done it before. I mean, he's brought in guys with a different voice and an outside voice to come in. And even though it hasn't necessarily been in the OC role since he's been in KC, there would be an opportunity, to look at maybe some other coaches out there, look at what other teams are doing. Because, I mean, honestly, you look at that Sean McVay that's right now growing a lot of roots. Connell's not the only one. I mean, there's other possibilities, other candidates out there that you look around at some other offenses and what's being done around the league. And there's a chance to bring in one of those guys who can help you and maybe take your offense in a different direction. I think Andy would consider that.
Well, and I'm glad that you bring that up because that's exactly where I'm going next, because the evolution of this team could be dependent on a little bit of outside influence. So why don't we just jump into that after this? You've heard us talk about these things before. These are Built Bars, and you have to take advantage of them. The new year is rolling, whether your resolution is or not, but these things are here to help you, whether they're a meal replacement or a substitute for something that you normally would take in, maybe isn't quite as healthy for you. All you have to do is try the puffs or try the marshmallow flavors or any of these, like the coconut almond, you have the toffee almond, all kinds of options for you that taste great. They taste like a candy bar. They provide the protein that you need, 130 calories on average, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, and 17 grams of protein that you need to get through the day. And they're all covered in actual real chocolate. So you get a taste of what you're looking for as well. You can replace meals. You can actually supplement meals. You can do whatever you need to get through the day. And we have a special offer for you. Go to built.com and use our code LOCKED15 to get 15% off of your order. Use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. We'll scrap what we're going to do for the third segment because you got on an interesting topic. And that's where I'm coming from as well. And I don't want to name names. I know there's rumors out there about other possibilities that Andy would look outside the tree. I think that's a good thing because I think the thing that we've seen a glaring, and not to beat the drum that I've been beating for the last 4 years, but I think you have to match the creativity in the run game that you have in the pass game if you're going to take the next step. And that McVay tree has a lot of options along those lines to bring some balance to the force, as we can see in your background, for this offense. Is that worth exploring? And do you think that Andy would?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely worth exploring. And you bring in the run game element too. I mean, remember, the Chiefs haven't finalized an offensive coaching staff. I mean, we think that they have on the defensive side because they made the announcement about, Joel Cullen coming in to coach the D-line and Brendan Daly moving the linebackers, but they haven't done anything with the offensive side of the football. And, and that's, to me, that means it's not a guarantee that, Greg Lewis is coaching running backs this year. I mean, that's, you could shuffle the positions again on the offensive side. So maybe guys will be in different roles. And if that's the case, then yeah, I mean, to me, I think you're right. I mean, I think Andy has done a really good job of innovating a lot of his, and a lot of his offensive pieces have moved dramatically since he got here in Kansas City. I mean, when he brought in Chris Alt and added some of the pistol formations and did some of the things with Alex, those have even continued to evolve. And now, the Mahomes is using them in a different way. And they do, with the pop passes, and there's a lot of different ways in which they've done with the receivers too. But the one position that hasn't really evolved greatly under Andy in Kansas City has been the running back position. I mean, the Chiefs kind of do what they do. And even though we saw a little bit more, he saw more man blocking and some gap runs this year, they still do a lot of the outside zones, but it's all stuff that I think teams have seen before. And I don't know that we see a lot of innovation in the run game. I do think that's an opportunity. And I think the Super Bowl is another great example because, you saw two teams and the Chiefs are going to have to, for better or worse, run the football better and more efficiently in the future because they're going to continue to see nothing but these 3-man fronts and dropping 7 and 8 in coverage. And how do you beat that? You run the football at people.
Mm-hmm. Get physical, take it at them, and then work off of it, I think is the way that you have to go. But that also leads to, do you have the type of guys that you want? Do you have enough innovation? And I can tell what you all are thinking out there. I'm looking at the camera, not at Matt right now, because I'm talking to all of you fans listening and watching. I know what you're saying. Andy's never going to change. He's a pass first West Coast guy. It's not going to change. There's an element to that I can get with though, Matt. And my question to you, everything you know about Andy Reid, all the contact that you've had with him, can that old dog learn new tricks, and will he let himself go down a path that he's not necessarily comfortable with?
I think he absolutely would, because, to me, again, it's not about necessarily, changing a lot of what you're doing, as far as, run pass mix. I mean, I think Andy's still going to want to be that guy. Yeah. Is he going to throw the football a lot? Yeah. Going to throw the football a lot. It's not going to change. Can you do it better? And can you do it more creatively and do it with some things that people haven't seen you do? Yeah. I mean, really, outside the RPOs, I mean, that's really the biggest change that Andy's, put into the run game. And once again, I mean, the RPOs aren't really about the run game. They're about the pass. So,
Right.
I mean, it's really just to set up the pass. And honestly, I mean, Chiefs, Mahomes in particular loves throwing out of the RPOs. So they almost never run out of one anymore, it seems like. So, yeah, no, I mean, to me, Andy doesn't need to change as far as his mix goes. It goes back to how you run the football and how you do it effectively. And when teams have seen the same runs over the years, it's easy. I mean, it gets a lot easier to defend them, even with light boxes. But if you throw some looks at them that they haven't seen before, that's going to help.
It opens up rather quickly. So that brings us to the concept. We talked about the defensive front and how much work has to go into that. There's lots of other positions that could use some bolstering as well. But the question becomes, do you think that the running backs on this roster are A, enough, and B, will they all return, specifically Darrell Williams? And do you think that there's enough impetus on the weaponry that Patrick Mahomes has at his disposal that they have to do something as a priority to add another significant weapon, maybe at the wide receiver spot?
Yeah, I mean, and anybody's listened to me before, and this is going to be a very common argument. I know you've heard from me before, but as I'll say it, I'll repeat it. When you have Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, you got two guys that are always going to be giving you enough to average maybe 6.25 yards a play. And it's going to be one of the best offenses in the league, top 5 offenses year in and year out. You add a third weapon to that, whether it's a receiver or a running back. Suddenly now you're averaging 6.5 yards a play. And now you're going to being maybe the best offense in the league year in and year out. You had a fourth weapon to that, which is what the Chiefs had when they had Kareem Hunt, Sammy Watkins, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce on the field. You're averaging 7 yards a play, and you're the greatest show on turf, and you throw a little bit of defense with that, and you're going to win Super Bowl every single year, unless injuries. I mean, you're just going to dominate and roll over people. So question is, hey, do the Chiefs have that running back right now? It can be one of those top 4 weapons. I don't know you can make that case because they haven't achieved that with Clyde yet. Darrell is a very dependable, number 2 guy. I mean, he can do a lot of everything, but he's not a, 1,500 yard back or anything like that. Jerick McKinnon's not either. I mean, but those 3 together can be a pretty good stable, but none of them are Kareem Hunt. None of them are that back that just takes your offense to another level. There's not another Sammy Watkins on this team. There's not another one that, can have those breakout games that when you need one, or can attract enough attention. I mean, as much as I like Byron Pringle and McCole Hardman has had his moments and DeMarcus has had his moments, none of those guys are drawing double coverages. None of those guys are drawing enough attention away to keep the focus off the other guys. So, to me, if the Chiefs are looking to upgrade the running back position, upgrade the number 2 wide receiver position, those are your opportunities to take this offense to a whole different level.
Do you agree that it's priority 2 or 1B, should we call it?
I mean, I certainly get the sense that the Chiefs are going to be in play for a receiver. I mean, there's a lot of great potential targets out there. I mean, we'll see how many end up making it all the way to free agency, but there's some really interesting targets. There's going to be people that the Chiefs have had interest in before, so they're certainly going to be interested again. But I think they're going to be out there. The running back situation, I mean, that gets tougher. I mean, to me, because one, there's just not that many, to me, dominant running backs around the league anymore. And 2, they only dominate for 2 or 3 years, and that's it. I mean, the Derrick Henrys are unicorns, and You're not getting Derrick Henry from the Titans. And even if you did, you don't want to, because there's a pretty good chance that Derrick Henry's just going to fall off the face of the earth one day. So to me, I mean, running back it's the toughest position of the group because, you don't know what you have. It can be a meteoric. I mean, even Kareem Hunt is not Kareem Hunt anymore. Mm-hmm. So, hey, Clyde was a good go. I don't think it worked out the way that the Chiefs wanted to. Is it worth, trying to find another running back? Yeah, because you know what? Kareem Hunt shows you can find running backs anywhere. And you just don't know which ones are going to click and make it work.
Just keep taking shots at it. That's my philosophy. Folks, free agency is right around the corner. The train is rolling towards it. We'll have more from Matt next week when we get a little bit closer to that decision, and maybe we'll have a little bit of clarity. We'll find out. Matt, thanks for the time. Thanks for putting everything on ChiefsDigest.com.
Always a blast. Appreciate it. Take care, everybody.
Folks, have a great one. We'll be back tomorrow, and we'll talk to you then.